something you did today made heaven react, and I need you to hear what happened next. Do not scroll past this. What I'm about to tell you is not something I say to everyone. It is not a general blessing released into the atmosphere, hoping someone catches it. This is a direct response from my throne to your screen because of something specific you did. And you probably do not even remember doing it. You dropped a stone into still water today, and the ripples have not stopped moving. It was quiet. It was small. It was one of those faithful moments that no human being witnessed. No one applauded, no one recorded, no one even knew it happened. You chose right when wrong was easier. You prayed when silence would have cost you nothing. You held on when releasing your grip would have been the most natural thing in the world, and you assumed it disappeared. You thought it sank to the bottom without consequence. But I need you to understand what actually happened in the unseen realm the moment that stone left your hand. The surface of the water did not just ripple, it sent waves in every direction simultaneously, waves you cannot track with your eyes, waves that are still traveling right now, reaching shores you have never visited, touching situations you do not yet know are connected to you, rearranging outcomes that were already decided before your act of faithfulness interrupted them. I reacted instantly. Heaven moved, plans changed. And the reason I brought you to this message right now is because you need to know what your small, quiet, invisible act of obedience just set into motion before the waves reach the shore and you mistake what arrives for coincidence. Stay here. What I reveal next will change how you see every private moment for the rest of your life. Type ripple if you have been doing the right thing in private and wondering if God even noticed. The waves have already reached places you did not know were listening. While you were going about your ordinary day, carrying your ordinary weight, breathing your ordinary breaths, something extraordinary was unfolding across the surface of a water you cannot see. The stone you dropped did not create a single ripple that faded after a few seconds. It created a pattern of concentric waves that have been expanding outward since the moment your quiet obedience made contact with the stillness. And the water has not settled. It is still moving. Right now. Not yesterday, not eventually. Right now, those waves are making contact with fixed things in your future that were previously unmovable. Doors that had rusted shut are vibrating on their hinges. Conversations that were never going to include your name are being interrupted by a frequency they cannot explain. Decisions that were already finalized are being reopened because the ripple from your faithfulness carried enough force to reach the desk where they were signed. This is not poetry. This is what happened. I need you to understand why you are hearing this right now, and not a week from now or a month from now, because the waves are arriving at their destinations today. The stone was dropped, the surface broke, and the ripples have been traveling at a speed that your natural mind cannot calculate, reaching outcomes you stopped praying about, touching people you stopped expecting to hear from, shaking structures you assumed were permanent. What you did in private just went public in heaven. And I did not send this message to the masses. I aimed it at the one whose hands are still wet from the water they thought nobody saw them touch. This is for you specifically, because what your small act just triggered is so disproportionately large that I refuse to let you walk through the rest of this day thinking nothing happened. The biggest wave has not landed yet, and when it does, you will need to be ready. Type 888 if you have been faithfully obeying in silence, and something inside you just confirmed that heaven saw every single moment of it. I have been watching your hands, the ones that keep dropping stones nobody counts. Not the public ones, not the acts you perform when others are observing and approval is within reach. I have been watching the private ones, the stones you drop when the room is empty and the audience is zero, and the only witness is the ceiling above your head. And the God you are not entirely sure is paying attention. I was paying attention every single time. I watched you last week when you made a choice that cost you something and rewarded you with nothing. I saw the exact second you decided to do what was right, even though doing what was easy was sitting right there, accessible, justifiable, and painless. You picked up the harder stone, you carried it to the water, and you dropped it in without expecting a single ripple to return to you. That is the moment I leaned forward on my throne. Do you know what captures my attention? Not the loud declarations or the performative faith that plays well in front of crowds. What captures my attention is the person who has every reason to stop being faithful, every reason to let go of integrity, to quit praying, to stop choosing right, and does it anyway, quietly, privately, without a single notification from heaven confirming that it mattered. You have been that person for longer than you realize. And I did not bring you to this message by accident. I did not allow your path to cross these words through some algorithmic coincidence. I guided you here, deliberately, intentionally, precisely because what I have been watching you do in private has accumulated into something so significant that I cannot stay silent about it any longer. Your stones were never small to me. Your water was never still without purpose. And what I have been tracking across the surface is about to explain why I chose your hands for this assignment in the first place. Type witnessed if you have been living faithfully in private, and you just needed God to confirm that not one moment of it was invisible to him. I know how heavy it gets when the water never responds. You drop the stone. You hear the small sound it makes as it breaks the surface. And then nothing. No wave comes back to you. No ripple returns, carrying evidence that your act of faithfulness traveled anywhere beyond the point of impact. The water just closes over the spot where the stone entered, and within seconds it looks as though nothing ever happened. And you are left standing at the edge, holding wet hands and dry hope. I have watched that moment repeat itself in your life more times than you can count. The prayer you prayed with everything in you, the one that scraped the bottom of your sincerity and cost you tears, you did not plan to spend. You released it like a stone into the stillest water, and the silence that followed was so total that you wondered if the water was even real, if the connection was even open, if anyone on the other side was even listening. The silence was the cruelest part, because you could have handled a no, you could have processed a not yet. What you could not process was the absence of any response at all, the feeling of speaking into a void that absorbs your words without acknowledgement. That is the loneliness you have been carrying, not the loneliness of being physically alone, the loneliness of being spiritually unconfirmed, of doing everything you know to do and receiving no signal, no sign, no whisper, no evidence that it registered anywhere beyond your own tired hands. I saw you in that silence. I was not absent from it. The nights you questioned whether your faithfulness was disappearing into nothing. I was on the other side of the surface, tracking every ripple in dimensions your eyes were never built to see. The water was never empty. It was full of movement you could not detect, and what I need to tell you next is where all those undetected ripples have been traveling. The part that exhausted you most was not the doing, it was the disappearing. You could handle the sacrifice. You could carry the weight of choosing right when wrong offered rest. You could endure the discipline of praying when your words felt like they were falling into an empty well. What drained you, what slowly pulled the color out of your faithfulness, was watching every stone you dropped vanish beneath the surface as though it never existed. You kept dropping them anyway. And that is what breaks my heart with pride. Because there came a point where you were no longer dropping stones out of expectation. You had moved past that. Expectation had been stripped from you by too many silent responses. You were dropping them out of something rawer than expectation, something closer to identity. You did it because you did not know how to be the kind of person who stops doing it, even when it hurt, even when the futility pressed against your chest like a hand trying to hold you back from the water. You went to the water anyway, every single time. I need you to hear me say this. The exhaustion you feel is not weakness. It is the specific kind of tired that only comes from sustained, unrewarded faithfulness. And the world does not have a name for it, because the world does not produce people who endure it. The world produces people who stop when the reward stops. You are not one of those people. You are the kind who keeps dropping stones into water that has given you no visible evidence that the ripples travel anywhere at all. That endurance was never invisible to me. Every stone you thought vanished was actually gaining speed beneath the surface, traveling horizontally through water so deep that the movement could not break the top. The ripples were real. They were fast, they were aimed, and they have been accumulating force this entire time. What that accumulated force is about to produce will make every silent drop worth it. Type faithful if you kept choosing obedience, even after the last visible evidence that it mattered dried up completely. Not one stone hit the water without purpose. I need you to stop carrying the lie that your faithfulness evaporated. It did not. Not a single act, not a single prayer, not a single quiet choice that cost you something and returned nothing visible. Every stone you dropped, from the very first one to the one you released today, is still producing waves in a system so vast that human eyes were never designed to track its reach. The water was never unresponsive. You were reading the wrong surface. What you watched was the top, the visible layer where splashes happen and ripples form and evidence is obvious. But the deepest waves do not travel on the surface. They move underneath, through currents that run below the visible plane, carrying force across distances that surface ripples could never reach. Every stone you dropped broke the surface and then dove deeper than the splash suggested. And the deeper a ripple travels, the farther it goes, and the more it rearranges when it arrives. Your quiet faithfulness was producing deep waves the entire time. The delays you interpreted as proof that nothing was happening were actually travel time. Ripples that move through deep water take longer to arrive, but they arrive with a force that surface ripples cannot match. A surface wave fades within feet. A deep wave crosses oceans. And what I have been sending across the deep on your behalf has been crossing oceans you did not even know were part of your story. Every unanswered prayer was a deep ripple in transit. The people who seemed to receive instant results, the ones whose stones created visible splashes that everyone could celebrate, their ripples traveled on the surface. Fast and shallow, what I am doing with your stones is different, deeper, slower to arrive. But when your waves finally make contact with the shore I prepared for them, the impact will not compare to anything the surface has ever produced. Your faithfulness was never wasted. It was being routed through the deep. The first wave just made contact with a shore you cannot see yet. Something shifted in your life within the last 48 hours, and you may not have recognized it for what it was. A thought that entered your mind from nowhere. A name that resurfaced without reason, a sudden clarity about something that has been foggy for months. That was not random mental activity. That was the first ripple arriving, the outermost edge of a wave that has been traveling through the deep since the day you dropped a stone nobody saw. The water is delivering now. I had been working underneath the surface of your life, in places you did not know had water. Behind relationships you thought were stagnant, there was current. Beneath opportunities you assumed were dead, there was movement. Within circumstances you had mentally filed as closed, ripples were pressing against walls, weakening foundations, preparing collapses that will look sudden to everyone watching, but were months in the making. None of this was accidental. All of it was ripple. What I set in motion through your quiet obedience has reached the first layer of your visible world. You will begin to notice small shifts, things that seem unrelated to anything you did, things that appear to come from nowhere. But I need you to know their origin. They started with your hands. Your prayers, your private faithfulness, your decision to keep dropping stones when the water gave you nothing back. The stone and the shore are finally connected. And this is only the outermost ripple, the gentlest, thinnest edge of a wave pattern that gets stronger the closer it moves to center. What you are about to feel over the coming days is not the main wave. It is the announcement that the main wave is approaching. The shore is beginning to feel what your hands released. What arrives next carries a force that will make this first ripple feel like a whisper before thunder. Type shifting if you have noticed something quietly changing in your life recently, and you now realize it was the first ripple from a stone you dropped in faith. This is why your hands were chosen to drop that stone. Not someone else's hands, not the hands of the person with the bigger platform, or the louder voice, or the more visible ministry. Your hands, the ones that shook while they prayed, the ones that wiped tears nobody saw, the ones that kept reaching for the water, even when every previous stone seemed to sink without a trace. I needed those exact hands for this exact ripple. What you did today, what heaven reacted to, was not a grand gesture. It was not a mountaintop declaration or a dramatic act of sacrifice that the world would write songs about. It was small, ordinary, almost invisible to the human eye, and that is precisely why it carried so much power. Because I have always done my most devastating work through the smallest stones dropped by the quietest hands into the stillest water. The title of this message is not exaggeration, it is report. What you did today made heaven change everything. I need you to sit inside that sentence and let it press against every lie that told you your private faithfulness was too small to matter. Heaven, the place where eternal decisions are made, where the blueprints of nations are drafted, where the trajectories of generations are plotted, heaven changed its plans today because of a single stone you dropped without audience or applause. Your obedience interrupted the scheduled order of heaven, and the reason the reaction was instant, the reason I did not file your faithfulness into a queue and process it in order, is because the water your stone touched was not ordinary water. It was water I had been holding perfectly still for this exact moment, prepared, waiting, so sensitive to impact that even the smallest stone would produce waves disproportionate to its size. I stilled the water on purpose, because I knew your stone was coming today, and I knew what it needed to produce. The main wave is approaching the shore, and everything in the atmosphere knows it. You can feel it, a tension in your spirit that is not anxiety but proximity. The way the air changes pressure before something massive arrives. The way the ground seems to hold its breath before the wave makes contact. Something inside you has been leaning forward since you started listening to this message. And that leaning is not wishful thinking. It is spiritual gravity pulling you toward the moment of impact. You are standing at the shoreline of your own miracle. The ripples that left your hands as whispers have been gathering strength across the deep. They merge with each other. Every prayer combined with every quiet choice combined with every tear you converted into obedience instead of bitterness. Individually they were small. Collectively they have formed a wave that the shores of your life have never experienced before, and it is seconds away from making landfall. I need you to understand the scale of what is about to happen, because your mind is still calibrated to the size of the stone. You are thinking small because the stone was small. You are expecting a small result because the act felt small. But waves do not honor the size of the stone. They honor the depth of the water and the distance they have traveled. And your waves have been traveling through the deepest water across the furthest distance for longer than you have been consciously waiting. What arrives will dwarf what was dropped. The person who prayed that quiet prayer this morning had no idea they were triggering the final ripple in a sequence I had been orchestrating for months. You thought it was just another stone, another day at the water, another act that would vanish without consequence, but it was the last stone, the one that completed the wave pattern, the one that tipped the entire system past the point of containment. What I reveal next is the moment the wave hits the shore. Type 333 if you can feel in your spirit right now that something massive is about to break through, and you know your quiet faithfulness is the reason it is coming. The wave just hit the shore, and I am rearranging everything it touched. This is the moment, not a future moment, not a symbolic moment. The moment your faithfulness has been building toward since the first stone left your hands and entered water you could not see the bottom of. The ripples have completed their journey. The deep waves have surfaced, and the shore of your life, the place where your circumstances live, where your relationships sit, where your opportunities are positioned, is being reshaped right now by a force that started with something so small you almost did not do it. But you did it, and heaven reacted instantly. I need you to hear what happened on my side when that stone made contact today. I stopped the scheduled order of your life. I pulled the blueprint off the wall. I looked at the trajectory I had drawn for your next 6 months, and I changed it. Not because it was bad, but because your obedience qualified you for a version I had held in reserve. A version I only release when someone proves through private faithfulness that they can be trusted with disproportionate blessing. You qualified today. With a stone nobody saw you drop. What you did in private moved me so deeply that I refused to respond in private. My reaction will be public, visible, unmistakable. The same people who never witnessed your quiet faithfulness are about to witness its result, and they will have no explanation for what happened because they never saw the stone. They only see the wave, and the wave is going to rearrange things so dramatically that the before and after of your life will be unrecognizable to anyone who knew you in the quiet season. This is not a small shift. This is a divine overhaul. Your private obedience just triggered a public reaction from heaven that cannot be undone, cannot be reversed, cannot be intercepted by any force that has ever tried to keep you invisible. The water has spoken, the shore has received it, and nothing in your life will sit in the same position after today. What the wave rearranged cannot be put back the way it was. I need you to understand the permanence of what just happened. This is not a temporary surge of blessing that will recede like a tide and leave you standing on the same dry ground you started on. The wave that hit your shore carried material with it. It deposited new ground, new terrain, new landscape that did not exist before the ripple from your faithfulness arrived. The geography of your life has been permanently altered. Your map just became obsolete. I am drawing a new one. The area of your life where you felt most invisible, that is the first territory the wave restructured. Where there was flatness, there is now elevation. Where there was silence, there is now resonance. The very place where your faithfulness felt most wasted is now the exact location where the evidence of heaven's response is going to be most visible. I aimed the wave there on purpose, because I wanted the proof to land where the pain was deepest. The connection between your stone and this shift is not coincidence, it is cause and effect. What you did today, that single act of quiet obedience, functioned as a trigger in a system I built specifically around your life. One stone, one still surface, one moment of private faithfulness, and the entire system responded. Not slowly, not incrementally, instantly. The way a single key turns a lock that releases every door in the building at the same time. Every door just opens simultaneously, and the reason this changes everything is because the wave did not just rearrange your external circumstances, it rearranged how heaven categorizes you. You were filed under faithful. Now you are filed under trusted. And the difference between those two categories determines the scale of what I am willing to release into your hands next. What I am about to release into your hands will take your breath away. Type in trusted if you just felt the weight of knowing that your quiet obedience today moved you into a new category in heaven, and you are ready for what that unlocks. People are going to approach you and you will not understand why they came. Conversations will start that have no logical origin, connections that feel engineered by something beyond chance. Someone will say your name in a context you never inserted yourself into. An opportunity will arrive wearing clothes you did not expect, carrying an invitation you did not apply for, offering something you stopped believing was available to someone like you. That is the ripple reaching people you never threw the stone toward. This is what makes water so different from every other force. When you drop a stone into still water, the ripples do not travel in one direction. They expand in every direction simultaneously, reaching shores you were not aiming at, touching surfaces you did not intend to disturb, moving objects you did not know were sitting at the water's edge. Your faithfulness was aimed at God, but the ripples went everywhere, and the everywhere is about to start responding. Professional doors that had nothing to do with your prayer life are going to swing open because the wave does not distinguish between sacred and secular territory. It restructures everything it touches. Financial shifts that seem disconnected from your spiritual obedience are going to arrive because the water does not respect the categories your mind uses to separate spiritual from material. When I move across all surfaces. Your stone did not create a religious ripple, it created a total ripple. People are going to notice a shift in you before you fully notice it yourself. A confidence that was not there last week, a clarity that replaced the fog you had been breathing in for months, a presence about you that makes others pause without knowing why. The unmistakable residue of someone whose private act just received a public response from the throne of heaven. The invisible season is ending, and what is about to become visible will make people search for an explanation they will never fully find. Type everywhere if you are realizing right now that your small act of faithfulness sent ripples into areas of your life you were not even praying about, and God is about to show you how far they traveled. I need you to hear why I placed the stone in your hands and not someone else's. This was not a distribution. I did not scatter stones across a crowd and hope one of them would land in water. I selected your hands, specifically, deliberately, after examining every available pair, because your hands possess something that most hands do not: the willingness to release without demanding a receipt. That quality is rarer than you know. Most people will only drop a stone if they can see the water. They need visible confirmation that the surface exists before they will release anything from their grip. They need proof that the ripple will happen before they invest the act. But you dropped stones into water you could not see. You released faithfulness into silence. You opened your hands over a surface that gave you no reflection, no confirmation, no evidence that anything existed beneath the point of impact. That is why I chose you, because faith without visibility is the rarest material heaven encounters. I did not choose you because you were the most qualified on paper. I did not choose you because your prayers were the most eloquent, or your life was the most assembled. I chose you because when every visible reason to stop was laid in front of you, when the evidence clearly supported quitting, you picked up another stone and walked back to the water. Your loyalty to the unseen is what made you irreplaceable, and that identity, the one who drops stones without demanding splashes, is not a temporary assignment. It is who you are at the deepest level. The world tried to train it out of you. Disappointment tried to erode it. Unanswered silence tried to convince you that this part of you was naive and foolish and wasted on a God who was not watching. But it was the very thing that made me watch you most closely. Your hands were not random. Your water was not random. And the ripple pattern forming across the surface of your future was designed exclusively for someone with your exact fingerprints. There is a voice in you right now trying to shrink what I just said. It is whispering that you are reading too much into this, that this message is beautiful but ultimately general, designed for thousands, landing on you by coincidence. And tomorrow morning you will wake up in the same unchanged life, with the same still water and the same sinking stones. That voice sounds reasonable. It sounds measured. It sounds like wisdom protecting you from another disappointment. It is not wisdom. It is scar tissue speaking. Your past taught you to preemptively reduce every promise to a manageable size, so that when the disappointment arrives it does not crush you completely. You learn to hope small because small hopes produce small wounds when they die, and that survival strategy kept you functional through seasons that would have destroyed someone less adaptive than you. But that strategy is outdated now. The water has changed. The doubt you feel is not based on present data. It is based on historical data, on a catalog of silent surfaces and vanished stones that your mind archived and now plays back every time hope tries to rise above the waterline. But the historical data does not account for what happened today. It does not include the variable of a God who reacted instantly, who changed heaven's plans. who is speaking directly to you right now with words so specific that the doubt itself is having trouble maintaining its grip. Feel it loosening. That is not imagination. That is truth displacing fear. The ripple that left your hands today is not subject to the same rules that governed your previous stones. Those were preparation stones, imported, counted, not wasted. But they were building toward this one. This stone was the tipping point, the one that crossed the threshold between accumulation and activation. And activated water does not behave like still water, it moves with intent. Your doubt is arguing with a wave that has already landed. The evidence is coming, and it will not ask your doubt for permission to arrive. Type tipping point. If you are choosing right now to let what God is saying override the voice that has been protecting you from hoping too boldly. Every time you stood at that water alone, I was standing behind you. You never saw me. You never felt the warmth at your back, or the steadiness that was holding your arm when the stone felt too heavy to lift. You thought you were alone at the edge, dropping your faithfulness into an empty expanse with no witness and no guardian, and no presence to confirm that the act was worth completing. But you were never at that water by yourself. Not once. I was there on the morning you almost did not go. The morning when getting out of bed felt like lifting a weight that sleep had not reduced. You dragged yourself to the water, not with enthusiasm, but with the raw discipline of someone who has forgotten why they do what they do, but cannot stop doing it. And when you opened your hands and let the stone fall with barely enough conviction to break the surface, I caught it on the other side and sent the ripple myself. Your weak throws still created waves, because I was beneath the surface receiving them. There were nights when you lay in the dark, convinced that you were the only person on earth doing the right thing for no reward, that the universe was a vast indifferent ocean and your stones were meaningless pebbles making meaningless splashes in meaningless water. The isolation of that feeling was suffocating, and I watched it press against your chest with a weight that no one in your life was equipped to understand. I understood it completely. And I need you to know that my silence during those nights was not agreement with your loneliness. It was the restraint of a God who knew that speaking too soon would interrupt a process that your endurance needed to complete. I was not distant. I was disciplined, holding my response until the moment it would produce maximum impact instead of temporary relief. That moment is now, and my nearness to you right now is closer than it has ever been. I know which stone cost you the most to drop. You have released many into the water, some with ease, some with effort, some with tears you did not plan on shedding. But there is one that nearly emptied you, one that required you to reach into a place so deep inside your own chest that your fingers trembled pulling it out. You almost kept it, almost closed your hand around it and walked away from the water entirely, because giving that particular thing to God felt like giving away the last piece of yourself that you were still holding for protection. But you opened your hand, and I have never forgotten it. I know the date, I know the hour, I know what you were wearing and what the weather was doing and what song had been stuck in your head all morning. I know the conversation you had with yourself before you went to the water, the argument between the part of you that said, keep this one for yourself, and the part of you that said, give it all. I watched the war, and I watched the winner, and I recorded the outcome in a book that heaven reads when it needs to be reminded what human faithfulness looks like at its most costly. Your name is in that book, and it is circled. I know the prayer you stopped praying out loud, because hearing your own voice say it again felt humiliating after so many repetitions without response. I know you moved it to a whisper, then moved the whisper to a thought, then moved the thought to a feeling that sat beneath your ribs without words, just a dull lake pointing towards something your mouth no longer had the energy to articulate. I heard every version, the shout and the whisper and the silence, and the ripple from that most costly stone, the one that nearly broke you to release, is the one that traveled deepest, moved farthest, and is carrying the most force toward the shore of your future right now. Type costly if you know exactly which stone God is talking about, the one that took everything to release, and you believe the ripple from it is about to return to you multiplied. When the wave delivers what it is carrying, do not push it back into the water. I am telling you this now because I know your reflex. I know what years of invisible faithfulness have trained you to do when something good arrives. You inspect it for traps. You hold it at arm's length. You look for the expiration date before you allow yourself to enjoy it, because every good thing you have previously received seemed to come with a hidden countdown to disappointment. That reflex is not discernment. It is a wound, acting as a gatekeeper. The blessing approaching you right now does not carry the conditions your past taught you to expect. It does not come with a clause. It does not come with a reversal built into its foundation. It comes as a direct response to a specific stone you dropped. And responses from heaven do not expire. They do not self-destruct. They do not arrive only to teach you a lesson about loss. This one arrives and stays. Receive it on those terms. When the door opens, walk through it without standing in the frame rehearsing reasons you do not deserve the room on the other side. You do not deserve it. You exceeded it. What you did in private was not the minimum requirement for blessing. It was an overflow that heaven was not obligated to match but chose to, because your faithfulness moved me beyond obligation and into desire. I want to bless you, not because the system demands it, because the stone you dropped made me want to. Stop negotiating with the blessing. Stop asking it to prove itself before you hold it fully. When people arrive with kindness, do not search their hands for hidden knives. When provision shows up in quantities that exceed your request, do not divide it in half, expecting the other half to disappear. When the wave deposits something beautiful on your shore, pick it up with both hands and let your chest feel the warmth of being responded to by a God who saw everything and chose to move. Hold what I give you, tightly, unapologetically, without looking over your shoulder for the wave that takes it back. You made it to the shore, and I need you to feel how significant that is. Not everyone arrives here. Not everyone keeps dropping stones long enough to see what the water was doing with them. Not everyone survives the silence of the middle, the long stretch where faithfulness produced no feedback, and the only thing sustaining you was a thread of trust so thin that some mornings you could barely feel it between your fingers. But you held it, and it held you. I want to thank you for something most people will never understand. Thank you for being faithful when faithfulness felt foolish. Thank you for going to the water on days when the water had given you nothing, not a ripple, not a whisper, not a single indication that your stones were doing anything other than sinking into oblivion. You went anyway. And that quiet, stubborn, unreasonable decision to keep going is the reason we are here together in this moment. Your hands are the reason the water moved. I need you to let the warmth of this settle into the cold places, the places that froze over during the long, invisible season, the parts of your heart that stopped expecting tenderness because tenderness had not shown up in so long that you forgot what it felt like. Against your skin. Let this reach those places. Let me into the rooms you locked when the silence lasted too long. It is safe now. The water answered. Everything you gave in private is being returned to you in ways your private mind never dared to project. The tears are being honored. The lonely prayers are being answered. The stones are coming back to you, not as stones but as shorelines. Entire new landscapes built from the accumulated impact of your faithfulness, hitting water that was always listening, always receiving, always sending your ripples exactly where they needed to go. You are loved beyond what the water can carry, and I have never been more proud of your hands. Type home if you feel the warmth of God's presence settling into the places that have been cold for too long, and you are finally letting Him in. You are not the person who started this message believing their faithfulness was invisible. That person existed 20 minutes ago. That person carried the weight of unwitnessed obedience like a bag of stones with no water in sight. That person had almost made peace with the idea that doing good in private was its own reward, and the only reward, because heaven seemed too vast and too busy to notice one pair of quiet hands, dropping small offerings into still water. That person has been replaced by someone who knows the truth. Your faithfulness was never invisible. It was never small. It was never absorbed into nothing. Every stone you dropped created waves that traveled through dimensions your doubt could not access. Waves that rearranged outcomes, interrupted schedules, canceled old blueprints and commissioned new ones. What you did today did not disappear. It detonated across the entire surface of heaven and forced a divine reaction so immediate that the angels paused to watch what would unfold. You are not unnoticed. You are the reason heaven moved today. From this moment forward, you will never stand at the water the same way. You will never open your hands over the surface and wonder if the stone matters. You will never walk away from a private act of obedience carrying the question of whether it registered. It registers. It always registered. And the God who watched every drop is the same God who is telling you now, keep going, keep dropping, keep choosing right when wrong is easier. Because every single stone your hands release sets off a chain reaction that reshapes things you cannot yet see but will soon experience. You are a stone dropper. And stone droppers reshape the world without making a sound. The water is listening, heaven is watching. And your hands, your quiet, faithful, unappreciated, beautiful hands, carry more power than any force that has ever tried to convince you that what you do in private does not matter. It matters. You matter. Now walk forward knowing that every step sends ripples. Subscribe to this channel so that every message heaven aims at your life reaches you the moment it is released. Your hands brought you here, and the next stone you drop already has waves waiting to carry it. Do not miss what the water does next. Type "Why matter" if you are leaving this message, knowing for the first time in a long time that your quiet faithfulness was never invisible, and that heaven has been responding to every single stone your hands have ever released.